art folks, it's Sadie, and today I'm so excited because I'm bringing you a collab with Coloring Karia. The collab involves using Billy Showell's Sennelier set to paint in Billy Showell's art style. So first, we're going to start with the paints. So Billy Showell's Botanical watercolor set has 12 colors, and it is a set that goes around the spectrum in the way that botanical illustrators often use colors. Starting with PY3 Lemon Yellow. This is a pretty typical example of PY3. It's very cool, not entirely transparent, but very bright. Sennelier Yellow Deep PY83 and PY153. This is a warmer yellow. In dispersion, it just kind of disappears. Not entirely transparent, but very nice and bright. PO43 and PY83 Red Orange. This is a really bright poppy orangey color. It has an insane amount of dispersion. It just takes over the page. And it's really bright and nice. This is pretty transparent. PR101, PY150, and PR206 Plain Gold Hue. I'm generally not a fan of different brands' Quinn Gold Hues. Just seeing that this had PR101 in it, I was already prepared not to like it. And in the swatch, I'm also not particularly impressed. However, in mixing, it definitely takes the place of what I would want a quinacridone gold to do in most cases, which is kind of to dull down but not entirely desaturate colors. PR254 Sennelier Red. This is, your red. It is pretty staining and can be laid on quite thick. It's very powerful. Unlike some of the other colors, all you need is a tiny little bit of this color and it has an impact. PV19 Rose Madder Lake. The Sennelier version of this color is a little strange. It's a little gloopy and it's a little weak. I'm not really sure what's going on with this version, but it is a very pretty pink. PR83 Alizarin Crimson Lake. So this is actually genuine Alizarin Crimson. They put this at 2 stars of permanence, but Alizarin Crimson is generally considered fugitive, so I'm not really sure about those 2 stars. It's pretty staining, a really nice color. The color that I actually like to use that's in this hue is the core Alizarin Crimson hue. PR122 Helios Purple, another quinacridone color. This one also has kind of a strange behavior, but it's pretty transparent. It has a weird kind of patterning in the pigment. I'm not really sure what that's about. I'm not sure if it's only my dispersion test, but it doesn't fill up the entire block like I'd expect PR122 to do. It's also kind of like the PV19, a little gloopy. PV23 Dioxazine Purple. So this is a really beautiful Diox purple. It is so strong, so powerful, so deep, so dark, so lovely, and extremely saturated. This is a really, really nice Dioxazine purple. French Ultramarine PV29 and PV15. So this is a little kind of weird. In this set, normally there's a cobalt blue. Basically, I'm using the Ultramarine Deep as the cobalt blue because their PV29 is a lot cooler than a normal PV29. So they've added, in the French Ultramarine, which you expect to be pretty warm, they've added PV15, which is curious. It's definitely a lovely shade. If you don't like ultramarines with a lot of granulation, then this has got you covered. It can get quite nice and deep. I did notice that in using it, I used up a lot of this color. It doesn't seem to last very long, even in the pan form. And as I said, the Ultramarine Deep, I have read from Scratchmade Journal that this is basically the same hue as cobalt because it is quite a lot cooler than you would expect an ultramarine to be, but not quite as cool as a phthalo. And I might add this to my palette as a non-toxic cobalt substitute. I'm not sure. PP153 Phthalo Blue. It's a phthalo blue. One thing that I noticed about these colors is that they seem to have a tendency to cauliflower. I don't normally get cauliflowering on my swatches. I am trying this on the Clairefontaine paper, which is not my normal paper for painting or swatching. But on the other hand, I didn't have problems with swatching other brands on this paper or painting other things on this paper. So I feel like it's gotta be the paints. Of course, I did a mixing chart and it is really bright. It almost feels like it's impossible to get muddy colors with this set. Everything is very bright and transparent, very clean. You can see why so many people love Sennelier. This is a collab with Karia from Coloring Karia. Karia is so awesome. I've been following her on YouTube for a long time and she is my friend. She is just so funny. If you don't know her, she runs a coloring channel and she has been getting into watercolor lately. And we were just chatting and she decided, since she has the full Sennelier set, to send me some of the Sennelier colors because I don't have very many, or I didn't have very many before this. And from there, it just grew into a collab and we decided to try to paint in the style of Billy Showell. That was quite a tall order, but it has been so much fun. And I'm honestly so happy that I got to do a collab with her. And you should definitely go check out her channel if you want to know about coloring books, color pencils, watercolors, and if you want to see her cute little kitties. And then when you look at the color wheel, these colors just mix together flawlessly. It's just really beautiful how they turned out. I used for the cools, which is the outer ring, I used Lemon Yellow, Madder Lake, and Phthalo Blue. And for the worms, I used Sennelier Yellow Deep, Sennelier Red, and Ultramarine Blue. And to be honest, even the worms mixed cleaner than I expected them to. A lot of people have asked me why I have not done a review of Sennelier and if I don't like Sennelier, and that's definitely not the case. I think Sennelier is one of those brands that has that little, je ne sais quoi. That's what everyone says. I remember thinking before I tried it that this was some kind of strange mysticism, but the paints really do have a little something extra to them. I've always thought that that little something extra was the honey, but after doing this test, I kind of have to wonder if that little extra something is brighteners. A good test that you can have to see if your paint has unnecessary fillers and brighteners in it is to put an expensive, transparent pigment on black paper. Ideally, you shouldn't see anything. It should be basically transparent. You can see that with the two Sennelier swatches on the right. Those are the phthalo colors. Those are not expensive colors, and you can see that they didn't add anything to them. However, the two swatches on the left are slightly opaque, and those are quinacridone colors. Those should appear just the same way that the phthalo colors, and in fact, when I tested Core and M Gram, you can see the slight color, but you can't see anything else. What you're looking for is a whitish cast or appearance. That's going to indicate that there are additives. So that's pretty disappointing to see that there are some kind of additives in Senoia, and considering how brilliant they look, I wouldn't be surprised if they are brighteners. It's up to you if you care about that or not. Okay, so now for the part where I try to paint like Billy Showell. If you don't know who Billy Showell is, he is the president of the Society of Botanical Illustrators, and she and Anna Mason are probably the two botanical illustrators who have the widest range of online video courses available. Billy also has a large number of very informative books. So I absolutely love Billy Showell's paintings, and I would love to learn how to paint like her, and I thought that this was a wonderful opportunity to try it. I have her set of paints, or close to it, with paints that were given to me by Karia. So I did a couple of her tutorials using my own reference photos. So I did the tutorial of an ivy leaf that you can find on her website. And I also did the tutorial of a cherry that you can find on YouTube. So it was difficult to do them, but I felt like I did a pretty good job. And I thought, okay, I'm ready to move on to tackling something myself. I picked up a decorative squash at a plant market that I was at recently, and I thought that would make an excellent subject. So I started plotting out, trying to figure out what color mixes I need, because he likes you to mix your colors ahead of time. I tried out different techniques, seeing in what order I should do it. And then I thought, okay, I've got this. Let's go. You can probably tell how this is going to go by the fact that I just said attempt number 1. Start at the beginning. Billy starts all of her paintings with a wet and wet wash. First, she puts down a glaze of water, and then she uses her brush to kind of mop away the excess water and push that water into the paper. So, of course, I had to do that. Then she takes a very nice concentrated amount of pigment. This was something that I learned to pay attention to. I often work with very watery mixes, and doing Billy's tutorials made me remember that I need to pay attention to the consistency of my mixes and not make them too watery. So she takes these mixes and puts them wherever the color is in her painting. After that's put in, you have it feathering all over the place, but not entirely wildly because you don't have the paper sopping wet with water. And then you use your brush to soften the edges of the paint and also to lift out any highlights. And that starts to give you the shape and form of the object from the very beginning. So I did that and I thought, okay, stuff is going good, looking like a squash. This is gonna be a piece of cake. But you know, it's really hard to paint when you're trying to think what someone else would do. In my head, I just kept thinking, what would Billy do? And I was not certain what Billy would do next. What I decided to do next was use a scrubber brush to scrub and make sure that I have my highlights. Billy has a special brush in her set of brushes called the Eradicator Brush, which I definitely need to get. It is a very tiny brush, but it looks like it is perfectly suited to lifting paint off of a page precisely. The rest of the brushes in her set also look amazing because I'm pretty sure that those are Raphael brushes, and if you have seen my video about brushes, you know that Raphael makes some of the best brushes ever, and they are quite expensive, and her set is basically a steal because you get a series of them and the Eradicator brush. So after I did a little scrubbing and lifting, I decided to just head straight for the patterning on the squash. And this is where I knew I shouldn't have done that, because really you should try to put your patterning on as one of the very last steps. Why is that? because if you put any washes or anything on top of that, it's going to disturb the patterning. But I was like, okay, no, we're gonna keep going. We can do this. So I started to deepen the wash of the yellow in the middle of the wash, and I felt like that was actually looking pretty good. I did that with a combination of wet and softening edges. I was really trying to avoid softening because that's the technique that I overuse, and I wanted to use more techniques like wet and dry brushing because that's something that Billy does. I was really fighting against my natural instincts, and that was getting kind of confusing in this painting. I also used some wet on dry for smaller areas because I noticed that for smaller areas, Billy doesn't flood the paper and she just does wet on dry. So I also went back in and added a little bit more green to make sure that had a little more pop. And then I started trying to add in the shadows. At first, I was just putting it wet on dry, and then I tried dry brushing, and that was not working because even though I was so excited to do dry brushing because dry brushing is not something that I normally do, and during the cherry tutorial, I did so much dry brushing. That was like a dry brushing boot camp. But this subject was not really suited to dry brushing. It didn't need that kind of texture. The squash is bumpy but smooth. So I ended up just trying to blur that out with another wash and add in the shadow in different areas. But then I just didn't know what to do. Even now, I still really like how the bottom portion of the squash turned out, but I really didn't understand what I could do with the top of the squash because I was trying to add shadows and it was coming out way too gray. And here was my critical flaw. Yellow and orange objects, but particularly yellow objects, are a special case in painting with watercolors. It's fairly difficult to get the shadows correct, and one of the things that you can do to try to make life easier for yourself is to do a purple underpainting. Now, I avoided this because purple underpaintings are one of my favorite things ever, and I wasn't just trying to do the stuff that I normally do, but then I saw in a little clippet of Billy painting a squash that she also did the shadows first. So you know what? I just decided to start over. I made the painting a little smaller and I started with a purple underpainting. And I was really liking how it was looking. I could see that I was getting the form. It was looking like a squash. And then I did more or less the same steps. I put a wash, I put a glaze of water, I dropped in color, I lifted out the color, and then I scrubbed out color. After that, I added the patterning, deepened the color with a bit of wet on dry, and put a glaze over the entire thing to unify the colors. I felt that the result of painting this one felt a bit more naturalistic and a bit less blotchy than the other painting, but I think my purple on the painting was a bit too strong because it definitely dulled down the overall look of the painting. Perhaps my purple on the painting was too strong, or I didn't use concentrated enough colors. Actually, I know I didn't use concentrated enough colors. The really cool thing about doing tutorials is that you learn someone else's style and it breaks you out of your comfort zone. I had to do a lot of things that I wouldn't normally do and think about a lot of things that I wouldn't normally think. Actually, at some point in time, I was just kind of staring at the squash being like, what are my life choices that have led me to be here not knowing how to paint a squash? But I learned a lot of things that I really want to practice, such as paying more attention to the consistency of my paint, using more wet and wet techniques, using dry brushing, paying more attention and being more careful when painting anything that's near the edge of your painting. Billy often has several steps where she cleans up the edges of her painting, and that just gives you such a nice, sharp, crisp definition that takes it from being okay to being outstanding. And there are a lot more techniques that I could definitely learn from her. And it was so easy using the botanical palette to follow along with these illustrations. Normally, I don't use the exact same colors, but having the exact same colors made me not have to think about it at all when I was doing mixing or anything like that. I already knew what to do. This didn't turn out perfect, but not all paintings turn out perfect, and I wanted to show it to you guys too. I hope that you guys had fun. This was interesting and helpful. Let me know if you have any questions down in the description below. Thank you so much for my patrons. You guys will be getting scans of everything. I'm just so appreciative for you every day. So in the end, I ended up doing these two squashes. I think they both could have been taken further, but I think they turned out okay. Which one do you guys like better? The one on the left or the one on the right? Okay, guys, talk to you next time. And until then, be gentle with yourself. Bye.